Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey and here's what's coming up over the next hour between 3 and 4. In the last couple of hours, Boris Johnson has become the first foreign leader to address the Ukrainian parliament since Russia launched its invasion of the country. We'll be getting reaction to this throughout now and 4 o'clock. As pressure grows on Keir Starmer after an alleged lockdown breach, will have an impact on Thursday's election. Do you care about this rather than Boris Johnson's wrongdoing? We'll be discussing that in depth, but also pressure too, with the local elections just 2 days away, on the Prime Minister as well. Could it be a bad night for the Conservatives? We'll be hearing from a polling expert. Plus, we've got so much more on the programme as well, not least of all looking ahead to the Northern Irish elections, possibility that Sinn Féin could top the poll there. Do get in touch. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. All that and so much more between now and 4. But first, at the top of the hour, here's Rosie with the news.
Good afternoon, it's just 2 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has told Ukrainian MPs that their country must and will win the war. In a video link addressing the Ukrainian Parliament, Boris Johnson said this is Ukraine's finest hour and they've broken what he calls the irresistible force of Putin's war machine. President Zelensky said the UK and Ukraine are now brothers and sisters. The UK government is providing Ukraine with a £300 million package of defensive military aid and is sending specialised civilian protection vehicles. Boris Johnson is the first world leader to address Ukraine's MPs since the invasion began.
Even in the parts of Ukraine that were temporarily captured, your populations, your indomitable populations, turned out to protest day after day. And though your soldiers were always outnumbered, 3 to 1 it is now, they fought with the courage and the energy of lions. And you've beaten them back from Kiev. You have exploded the myth of Putin's invincibility.
The United Nations says it's evacuated 101 people from the steel plant in the southern city of Mariupol. The UN says the men, women and children who are holed up with Ukrainian fighters in the underground bunker for 2 months are now receiving humanitarian aid. in Zaporizhia. It's believed 100,000 civilians are still in the besieged city that is currently occupied by Russian forces. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced a new wave of retaliatory sanctions against the West. The Kremlin said it's in response to what they're calling unfriendly actions from foreign states and international organisations. According to the decree, Russia will forbid the export of products and raw materials to people and entities that it's sanctioned. Details of which countries and firms affected by the measures have not been provided. The government's being threatened with legal action over so-called unreasonable delays in processing hundreds of Ukrainian visa applications. Potential sponsors under the Homes for Ukraine scheme say it's putting refugees at risk. Figures compiled by would-be hosts suggest there are at least 800 refugees still waiting, despite applying within the first 2 weeks of the scheme opening. Lawyers for the two groups are sending a pre-action protocol letter to the Home Office. BP has announced losses of nearly £18.5 billion, despite making oil and gas profits of £5 billion in the first 3 months of this year. The loss was caused by BP cutting ties with Russian oil producer Rosneft due to the war with Ukraine. BP now says it will invest up to £18 billion into North Sea oil and gas by 2030. Sir Keir Starmer says oil and gas companies should be taxed on unexpected profits to ease the cost of living crisis.
Oil and gas companies in the North Sea have made more profit than they were expecting, so let's have a windfall tax on that and use it to help people with their energy bills, up to £600 for those most in need.
It could be months until the first plane leaves Britain carrying Channel migrants to Rwanda. A spokesman for the Prime Minister confirmed the government has received paperwork stating that it will face legal challenges. The government previously indicated that Boris Johnson wanted to see the scheme start by the end of May. The US president has said he doesn't know whether the leaked Supreme Court draft abortion ruling is genuine or reflects a final decision. Joe Biden has added his office will be ready to protect abortion rights when a ruling is issued. It's after a leaked draft suggests the Supreme Court will vote to overturn the Roe v. Wade decision that legalised abortion nationwide in America. A life-saving test to spot a rare form of eye cancer in babies in the womb is being rolled out across the NHS for families at risk. It's a pre-birth blood test of the mother that identifies those with retinoblastoma, and it's likely to identify around 50 cases each year in England. If this cancer is picked up early, it can often be successfully treated, with more than 9 out of 10 children cured. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing with Darren.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. It is coming up to 7 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Well, as we've just been hearing in the news bulletin, in the last couple of hours, the Prime Minister has spoken to the Ukrainian Parliament in Kyiv. He spoke down the line, of course, where he praised the heroics of the Ukrainian people and stated that it was the country's finest hour. Let's have a look back at some of the highlights of the Prime Minister's address.
Day after day, missiles and bombs continue to rain on the innocent people of Ukraine. And in the south and the east of your wonderful country, Putin continues with his grotesque and illegal campaign to take and hold Ukrainian soil. And his soldiers no longer have the excuse of not knowing what they are doing. They are committing war crimes. And their atrocities emerge wherever they are forced to retreat, as we've seen at Bucha, at Irpin, at Hostomel, and many other places. And we in the UK will do whatever we can to hold them to account for these war crimes. And in this moment of uncertainty, of continuing fear and doubt about the future, I have one message for you today. Ukraine will win. And I'll tell you why I believe you will succeed, dear members of the Rada. When they came to me last year and they said that there was now overwhelming evidence that Putin was planning an invasion, and we could see his battalion tactical groups well over 100 of them gathering on the border. I also, I remember a sense of horror, but also of puzzlement, because I'd been to Kiev on previous visits, and I think I'd met some of you, and I'd stood in the Maidan, and I'd seen the tributes to those who had given their lives to protect Ukraine against Russian aggression. And I've wandered the lovely streets of your capital, and I've seen enough about Ukrainian freedom to know that the Kremlin was making a fundamental miscalculation, a terrible mistake. And I told everybody I knew, anybody who would listen, that Ukraine would fight and Ukraine would be right. And yet there were some who believed the Kremlin propaganda, that Russian armor would be like an irresistible force going like a knife through butter and Kiev would fall in days. Do you remember they said that? And people rang Volodymyr and they offered him safe passage out of the country. And he said, no thanks. And they said that this Rada of yours would have to be reformed outside Ukraine, maybe even in Poland or in London perhaps. And I refused to believe it. And today you have proved them completely wrong. Every one of those military experts who said that Ukraine would fall. The so-called irresistible force of Putin's war machine has broken on the immovable object of Ukrainian patriotism and love of country. This is Ukraine's finest hour that will be remembered and recounted for generations to come. Your children and your grandchildren will say that Ukrainians taught the world that the brute force of an aggressor counts for nothing against the moral force of a people determined to be free. They will say that Ukrainians proved by their tenacity and sacrifice that guns and tanks cannot suppress a nation fighting for its independence. And that is why I believe and I know that Ukraine will win. You've proved the old saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And, which is an old English saying, I don't know how well that translates into Ukrainian, but you get what I'm trying to say. And as you turned the Russian army back from the gates of Kiev, you not only accomplished one of the greatest feats of arms of the 21st century, you achieved something deeper and perhaps equally significant. You exposed the historic folly that Putin has made. When a leader rules by fear, and when he rigs his elections, and when he jails his critics, and he refuses to have a free media, and he listens just to sycophants, and when there's no limits on his power, that is when he makes catastrophic mistakes. And it's precisely because we understand this danger in Britain and in Ukraine, and precisely because we are democracies and that we have a free media, the rule of law, free elections, robust parliaments such as your own, we know that these are the best protections against the perils of arbitrary power. And when an autocrat deliberately destroys those institutions, he might look as though he's strong, and some people might even believe it, but he's sowing the seeds of catastrophe for himself and for his country, because there will be nothing to prevent him committing another terrible mistake. Putin's mistake was to invade Ukraine, and the carcasses of Russian armor littering your fields and streets are monuments not only to his folly, but to the dangers of autocracy itself. And what he has done is an advertisement for democracy. On a day when Putin thought he would be in charge of Kiev, I had the honor of being able to visit your wonderful city, and I saw the defiance of the people of Ukraine. And I know so much about the terrible price that Ukrainians have paid and are paying for your heroism. Today, at least one Ukrainian in every 4 has been driven from their homes. 2/3 of all Ukrainian children are now refugees, whether inside the country or elsewhere. So no outsider like me can speak lightly about how this conflict could be settled if only Ukraine would relinquish this or that piece of territory, or we find some compromise for Vladimir Putin. And we know what happens to the people who are left behind in the clutches of this invader. And we who are your friends must be humble about what happened in 2014. Because Ukraine was invaded before, for the first time, and Crimea was taken from Ukraine. And the war in the Donbass began. And the truth is that we were too slow to grasp what was really happening. And we collectively failed to impose the sanctions then that we should have put on Vladimir Putin.
There you go. That was the Prime Minister speaking to the Ukrainian Parliament a little earlier on today. Let's bring in the Conservative MP for Ipswich, Tom Hunt, who joins us down the line. Tom, thank you very much indeed. As also joining us here on GB News. Just first of all, in relation to that speech, it is quite a remarkable feat, isn't it? Boris Johnson, one of the first leaders to go to Kyiv, the first leader to address the Ukrainian Parliament. There is no doubt, is there, that the Ukrainians have valued his support?
I think that's quite clear. I think the Prime Minister's certainly been ahead of the game when it comes to showing that unwavering support for Ukrainian people. And I definitely think it's a case that President Zelensky sees the Prime Minister as arguably being his most reliable and dependable ally. And as a Brit and as a British MP, I'm quite proud of that.
And on this issue, Tom, of kind of extra weapons for Ukraine, is there a feeling that Britain is doing enough, or do you feel actually in some ways we should possibly even go further?
It is, of course, a delicate balancing act. I think we want to be as robust and as strong as we can be. And we have done more in terms of we were the first country in the world to give lethal sort of military equipment to the Ukrainian army, one of the most giving countries in that regard. We are dealing with, in Russia, a nuclear power. So, we want to be conscious of that. But at the same time, we want to be pushing it as far as we possibly can in terms of, giving him the military equipment we need. And I think we've got that balance about right so far. The Prime Minister is determined to do everything he can. And if there's an opening for him to do a bit more, he'll always take that opening and take that opportunity. And I think we're getting a balance about right at the moment.
OK, let's move away from Ukraine now and focus on local elections, of course, just in a couple of days' time. Millions of voters going to the polls across England, Scotland, Wales and of Northern Ireland. Are we going to see a blue wall meltdown? We talk about the red wall a lot, don't we, Tom? Are we going to see a blue wall meltdown for the Conservatives? How fearful are you that actually many of your voters may well switch to the Lib Dems?
We don't really have many Lib Dems in Ipswich. I think we have a little bit of Ipswich where there's some Lib Dems, but they don't generally. I think there's some wards where Lib Dems stand and only get about 40 votes. So we're very much a blue-red seat and council in Ipswich. And so I really only know what's going on in Ipswich. I've spoken to probably 1,000 people over the last few weeks in Ipswich, and I think it's been for a mid-term local election. Bearing in mind the challenging national context, I think that it's been pretty positive. Quite what's going on elsewhere, I don't know. I hear reports that maybe it might be different in other parts of the country where you've got Lib Dems. But I think it's quite clear that when you're in government and you have a mid-term local election, you're not expected to do that well. You're not expected to make huge advances. I think we'll all, when the results come in, probably Friday morning and they're all in, we'll look at the whole thing in the round. We'll look at comparisons with government's mid-term, what we expect to see. And let's be honest, there's also some pressure on Keir Starmer. He needs to show that he's able to pack a punch and win and make significant advances all over the country. So there's some pressure on him as well. But I suspect that there'll be classic midterm local election results. Who knows? Maybe they could be slightly better than we expect in some areas.
In saying that, do you think if they're not that great, is that the moment then that Boris Johnson kind of needs to look at the cost of living crisis again, needs to decide, frankly, that this is something that can't be put off until the autumn, that needs to be tackled now? Because it is clear that is the number one issue, and it's the number one issue where people are really feeling it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. You know, cost of living has come up on the doorstep. It is something that many of my constituents are concerned about. It's something that I'm concerned about. I appreciate the government's in a very difficult position. There's inflation is, arguably the most important issue here, and it's what we can do to try and influence that. And the sad reality is that there's sometimes not a lot we can do. However, though some help has been announced, I'm sure that the government will be thinking about what else it might be able to do to target support of those who need it the most. So, we might have some more support in the way, and I'm sure if we can do that, and if the government feels it's able to, it will do that. But look, it is an issue of concern for many of my constituents, and whilst appreciating the government's in a tricky position, if it can do more, it should do more, and I'm sure it'll be thinking about ways in which it can do more.
And just very finally, on Sir Keir Starmer and his beers, we heard him on the radio this morning today. I think he refused to answer 3 times whether the police had been in touch with him about it again, though he was exonerated first time round. Are you guys trying to just make a bit of mischief ahead of the local elections? I mean, it's not really equatable what he's alleged to have done compared to the dozens, potentially, of parties that took place in and around government.
Well, that's what you say, potentially. What we do know is the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were fined for that event, that sort of 9-minute event when there was that cake, which I understand wasn't eaten. Well, look, the comparison is between that event and the event that Starmer was at. Nobody's been able to tell me why the Starmer event didn't break rules and the Prime Minister's event did break rules. Well, this point about how they'd been working and they'd be drinking a beer at 10 at night. And of having a curry, well past 10 p.m. at night, and we're supposed to believe that they've gone back to work. There's been no detail provided about that.
Yeah, but Tom, I mean, ultimately, that's only a decision the police can make. And I know there's 2 different police forces involved in that. You and I aren't going to kind of solve that mystery here. But what I'm trying to say to you is, if the Prime Minister's incident, which you got fined for, was just that cake incident, I think you're right. It wouldn't be a big political issue. We would all have moved on. That the problem for the Prime Minister is that it's not comparable to Keir Starmer because, first of all, Prime Minister came up with the rules. He also apparently, or allegedly, I should say, did it multiple times. And there's questions about whether he's lied to Parliament about that. That's what makes it on a different scale.
I don't agree with you respectfully. I've looked at the Keir Starmer event. I think the rules were broken. And if the rules are broken, Keir Starmer should be fined and held for account in exactly the same way as the Prime Minister. I don't think Keir Starmer should be treated any more softly than the Prime Minister. And let's also remember, Keir Starmer was the biggest supporter of restrictions. He wanted more restrictions than the government even introduced. He's saying it was a work event. We've got somebody saying they delivered a curry for 30 people and then retracting the story. We've had him swigging beer, lying about Angela Rayner's attendance. I don't buy it. I think that it's, and I also think there's a danger here. We've had the police force, and these rules were introduced at the national level, formed at the national level. They should be applied equally and fairly wherever you are in the country. I'm not comfortable with a situation that you have one police force taking a completely different approach than another police force. This is a politically sensitive issue, and whatever happens, I think that regardless of the colour of the party that the individual's leading, they should be treated in the same way. That's all we're asking. That's all we're asking. And no one can explain why the Prime Minister and Chancellor got fined for their event and Starmer didn't get fined for his. And it's no good to say, well, he...
Yeah, I mean, they are 2 different events with 2 different police forces involved, but I'm sure we will We will find out in the days and weeks to come. Tom, as always, we've run out of time, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for joining us. Tom Hunt there, joining us from Ipswich. Thank you, Tom, on this Tuesday afternoon. We're going to pause on GB News. By the way, do get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll be in Dover. Hundreds of migrants have arrived in the last couple of days, despite, of course, that government policy on Rwanda. Plus, we'll be talking about those local elections, the situation in Scotland and in Northern Ireland too. All that in just a couple of minutes. I'll see you after these commercial breaks.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
A very welcome back to GB News, 26 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. Just bringing you up to date with some breaking news in the last couple of minutes. That is the former MP Imran Khan has formally quit his Wakefield seat. You may remember, of course, he was convicted for sexual assault a couple of weeks ago. There had been pressure on him to resign immediately. He has now handed in that resignation officially, according to the Treasury. That has been moved, and there will be a by-election in Wakefield. No set date on that yet, but it will be, I suspect, in the next month or so. Right, let's move on to the local elections and to Scotland, where the SNP are expected to dominate, with Labour and the Conservatives battling it out for the remaining seats. Our reporter, Davy Donaldson, went to East Lothian to get a sense of the issues that people there are talking about on the doorstep and may well influence how they vote on Thursday.
Bass Rock, one of the most scenic views of the East Lothian coast, which is famous for top-class golf courses. The historic town of Dunbar is situated 30 miles east of Edinburgh, and has a population of just over 10,000. So, what issues do people there want to see addressed?
We have a big lack of small industrial units. It's really strangling business. We have a huge amount of holiday homes that we need to somehow get the holiday homes taxed so they get the prices down for local people so local youth can actually stay in the area.
The coronavirus and that, just at its end there, that they, you know, with the wearing the face masks and that could have been, you know, like brought in line with what was happening in England and all the rest of it, you know, and it seemed to be that Nicola Sturgeon just seemed to keep it going and going and going, and we were the last people to...
Dunbar, people of Dunbar are looking for, but just a... It was once the fourth largest town in Scotland in the high Middle Ages and is steeped in agricultural history. These local people told me what action they want to
see an improvement in the high street. Every town, I think, in East Lothian, big support for that. Also with the roads, that would be, I've just realised I've got a rip in my tyre from a pothole, I imagine. Support for the NHS, because actually I'm a retired nurse and I know it's been pretty awful for them. And I suppose schools as well, teachers. I've got grandchildren, so just like, lots of support for them.
What I'd like to see happen is probably more youth centres in the town. When I was younger, we used to go to a youth centre. When I was younger, gets the kids off the street to cause a mischief. I'd like to see that more happen again in the near future. That's what I'd like to see more happening.
Well, I've been to Dunbar and Haddington trying to find out what local people want to see happen in the East Lothian Council elections. We've seen a wide range of views, really. Some people trying to get young people better onto the property ladder. Also young people in terms of youth clubs as well, get youth clubs for them to try and help them out. We've seen some people disenchanted with the SNP as well with regards to wearing face masks. So quite a lot of different things here. We'll find out more, of course, as we go to the polls, and eventually we'll find out afterwards what sort of action is going to be taken on the issues that really affect the people of East Lothian. David Donaldson, GB News.
And don't forget, we'll have full coverage of the local elections here on GB News throughout Thursday evening into Friday and indeed into the weekends. That is coming up. Vote 2022. But before all of that, I'm going to be talking about Blair's come back in a couple of minutes. Let's bring you up to date with the news just after 3:30. Here's Rosie again.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's 3:30. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. The Prime Minister has told Ukrainian MPs their country must and will win the war. In a video link addressing the Ukrainian Parliament, Boris Johnson said this is Ukraine's finest hour and they've broken what he calls the irresistible force of Putin's war machine.
Even in the parts of Ukraine that were temporarily captured, your populations, your indomitable populations, turned out to protest day after day. And though your soldiers were always outnumbered, 3-1 it is now, they fought with the courage and the energy of lions. And you've beaten them back from Kiev. You have exploded the myth of Putin's invincibility.
It could be months until the first plane leaves Britain carrying Channel migrants to Rwanda. A spokesman for the Prime Minister confirmed that the government has received paperwork stating that it will face legal challenges. The government previously indicated that Boris Johnson wanted to see the scheme start by the end of May. The United Nations says it's evacuated 101 people from the Azovstal steel plant in the southern city of Mariupol. The UN says the men, women and children who were holed up with Ukrainian fighters in underground bunkers for 2 months are now receiving humanitarian aid in Zaporizhia. It's believed 100,000 civilians are still in the besieged city that's currently occupied by Russian forces. As you've been hearing, the Treasury says the former Conservative MP Imran Ahmed Khan has formally resigned from his Wakefield seat after being found guilty of sexual assault. Khan denied assaulting a 15-year-old boy in 2008, but was convicted after trial. We'll bring you more on that today. You're now up to date. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Now let's head back to Darren and this afternoon's briefing.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Lots have been getting in touch. Dominic says, thank you for showing the address by Boris. The way the mainstream media have covered it makes me sick. It's time we should feel proud of our country. Yvonne says, Keir Starmer and Angela also tell lies. That's the point. Ted says, this is on what's happening with the channel. We'll be talking about that a little later. People are sick and tired of the different plans that the government make to reduce illegal immigrants. That doesn't work. Transport to Rwanda should have already been sorted by military aircraft that can accommodate and contain criminals. And Tracy says it matters with Starmer because he made a fuss about Boris. This again on that alleged rule breaking. Starmer voted for the rules. A curry was delivered for 30 people. They lied about Angela Rayner. Of course it matters. He lied about it, something the Labour Party would deny. And very delightfully, Julia says she's enjoying the show and praises my tie. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for watching. Let's get more on the local elections. They are in 2 days' time. Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, is with us in the studio. Good afternoon, Tom. I was talking to Tom Hunt just a little bit earlier in the programme, talking about the collapse of the blue wall. We heard an awful lot about the red wall in recent years. But there is a worry, maybe not in Ipswich, but elsewhere, that the Liberal Democrats in some ways are not quite as toxic as they were and could pick up quite a lot of Conservative seats.
That is certainly a big worry, but also within that is a way in which these elections are being fought not just on the issues, but with the technicalities of the vote as well. The Labour Party has stood down a number of candidates in the southwest, for example, an area where the Lib Dems tend to do better, and the Lib Dems are standing down more candidates in the northeast, an area where the Labour Party tends to do better. Now, this has led to allegations from the Conservative Party that a formal pact has been agreed between those two parties to make it more likely that they'll be able to stand down for the other to have the candidate that has the best chance of beating the Tories win. Whether or not there's a formal pact there, it does seem like there is at least some element of local cooperation. And to some extent, this means that across the country, we have a relatively, or at least I should say across England, because there are also elections, of course, in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. But across England, it seems like in wherever you go, there are two parties, the Tory party and the party opposing the Tory party.
And others, yeah. Just, I mean, there's always been talk about a progressive alliance, hasn't there, to a degree. I mean, it's not that controversial in our politics that there are pacts either before or after elections. We've seen that before. But when it comes down to it, the nub of the issue, I think, for the Conservative Party may not be those alternative parties, is that many of their voters may not turn out at all. And that's also quite normal, as in we are talking about a midterm election.
We are indeed, and this is potentially the most stinging part for the Conservative Party. Voters who would turn out perhaps to hold their nose and vote Conservative because they don't want a socialist Prime Minister at the time of a general election feel that the stakes are rather a lot lower in the case of a local election. Which individual decides how many bins are taken out in which particular weeks seems like a less existential issue than something about the governance of the country and the direction of the overall economy. That being said, a lot of people will be voting on how they feel about national parties, will be wanting to give the government a bloody nose. We know that there are some big problems in this country and indeed across the Western world at the moment with cost of living. But when we're looking at this election, turnout is absolutely the watchword.
Indeed, and just on that, finally, Tom, the cost of living crisis. The Prime Minister's interviewed this morning on Good Morning Britain. A reminder that this really is a very, very important issue for millions and millions of people. Do you think Keir Starmer's line about that we're the only G7 country increasing tax is going to stick with voters? I mean, is there a possibility that, forget about Partygate and all the other stuff, it is going to be this issue that will harm the Conservatives most?
It's a strong line. However, the Labour Party is proposing raising taxes. Just elsewhere, they want to. Their big policy to deal with the cost of living crisis is a tax rise on energy firms. Now, the Conservative Party can genuinely say it is cutting taxes for people earning less than £36,000 a year and increasing them for people earning more than that. So when you get into the technicalities of tax policy, though, this isn't the be-all and end-all of the cost of living crisis. It's mainly an inflationary crisis, a crisis driven by prices that are rising rather than taxes that are going up. The taxes certainly don't help, but ultimately the fact of the matter is that in the European Union, inflation's running at about 7.5%. In the United States of America, inflation's running at over 8%, and in the United Kingdom, it's currently running around 6.5%, likely to rise higher, though. It's a dreadful situation.
The Prime Minister suggests
the Western world
could be as high as 10%. But as always, when there are global events like the financial crisis, political parties make hay, don't they, in their own countries. Very finally, do you know who Lorraine Kelly is?
I believe Lorraine Kelly presents the show immediately after Good Morning Britain on ITV.
But you only believe it, and you're not a regular viewer. No. Well, of course, you'd be clashing with your very own programme.
It would be clashing with my programme, so I'm afraid I can't ever say that I've tuned in.
Maybe that's what the Prime Minister doesn't know, because he tunes in every morning for Tom Harwood at 9:30. Tom, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's a quick break here on GB News. It is 22 minutes to 4 o'clock. We're going to be talking about what's happening in Dover in just a couple of minutes, and also those Northern Irish elections. Could Sinn Féin be the largest party in Stormont in just a couple of days' time? That and much more after the break.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you for your company on this Tuesday afternoon. Now, the Northern Irish Assembly election is set to be held on Thursday, where voters will elect 90 members to Stormont, and it's not necessarily looking terribly good, it must be said, for the DUP. A poll out today suggesting that they could potentially finish in third position. They're neck and neck with the Alliance Party at around 18% of the vote, storming ahead with nearly 27% in this poll for the Irish News is Sinn Féin. Let's speak to the DUP MP for Strangford, Jim Shannon. Jim, very good afternoon to you. Are you concerned about the polls?
Well, Darren, we've had lots of polls. That poll's the latest one. I haven't heard it, but I heard Slugger O'Toole's poll on Friday, which was Sinn Féin 24, DUP 22. We had the poll Monday of last week, which showed the DUP in 20 and Sinn Féin in 26. So polls vary, and they're very clear to me that while they're an indicator, they aren't necessarily, perhaps with great respect, the final analysis when it comes to the votes.
They're not, and you're right, the polls do vary, but I don't think there's been a poll this election that showed that Sinn Féin are not in the leads. They are, frankly, aren't they, most likely to be the largest party on Friday or Saturday, whenever the votes are finally counted, aren't they?
If the polls are correct, but I have to say that our feedback that we're getting on the doors, statistically, and the feedback from our constituents indicate to us that there's certainly a growing number of people who will be voting for our own party and for the Unionist family. That's for the TUV and for the Ulster Unionists as well, in the anti-Northern Ireland Protocol basis. But I would say this: I do believe in my heart strongly that the feedback, we have the numerical strength, Unionists, we have the statistical strength, we have the numbers if people go out and vote. And certainly the feedback in the doors indicates to us that people are very focused upon who will be First Minister, who will have control. Where does that lead us to if Sinn Féin were to be First Minister? We will be combating them to ensure that our campaign to achieve First Minister is also one that's very much in the making. I do believe that we are setting the scene for the next 25 years or 30 years of Northern Ireland, where it goes. And many people, just this afternoon on the doors, a family were telling me that they're very focused on the legacy they will leave for their grandchildren and for them, their great-grandchildren. So these are really key issues. It's a key election. There's a lot to play for, and it's far from over.
Indeed, and as they always say, it's the actual vote on the day that counts. But Jim, if Sinn Féin do end up as the largest party, I mean, personally, aside from your party's position, because I don't think it's terribly clear, I mean, personally, would you like to see the executive reformed, even if Sinn Féin are the largest party, even if they are or would get the First Minister's position?
Well, I think our party leader is very clear. He said yesterday, he's in the papers today saying the same thing. Next Monday, he is in the business of sitting around the table with the other parties to look at the re-establishment of the Assembly and whatever form that will be. I have to say that we're also very clear, and he's very clear, and I'm very clear from us in Strangford here, that we're out to win for our 3 seats, 3 DUP candidates, for Peter Weir, for Harry Harvey and for Michelle McAlpine. And we believe this is a Unionist seat that we can control and can win the seats, but we do need people to commit themselves and to make the effort and win those votes by going out and doing that very, very clearly. So where are we? I think we are in the business of winning. Jeffrey has said very clearly the position of First Minister is within our grasp, within the grasp of Unionists. I think it's also within the grasp of us all, and I think we have to aim for that top spot.
OK, it promises to be a fascinating election. Jim, thank you very much indeed. It always is in Northern Ireland. Thank you very much for your time, for joining us there from Strangford. And just to let you know, we'll have full coverage of the results from the Northern Irish Assembly. I'll be in Belfast throughout the weekend, bringing you the results here on GB News. Let's move on now, because last month, I'm sure you remember, the government announced its resettlement scheme for migrants who illegally were trying to enter the UK to be sent to Rwanda. The Home Secretary's controversial policy was boosted as a deterrent to those who pay criminal gangs to try and cross the channel in small boats. Now, we had thought, and the government had claimed, it would lead to a reduction in the number of people, yet it seems that the weather was the respite and not the policy, as the number of channel migrants trying to reach the UK hit a new record over the bank holiday weekend. Ellie Costello is in Dover and sent us this update.
Well, after an 11-day break, this weekend was a busy one for people making that journey from France to the UK. The Ministry of Defence says that 254 people made the crossing in 7 small boats on Sunday. And yesterday, the French authorities say they managed to stop 15 people from making the crossing, but 293 people successfully crossed on Monday. And today it is rainy and windy in Dover. It's very grey behind me, but that has not stopped the migrant crossings. I've heard reports that around 40 people came over on one small boat around 6 a.m. this morning. So we are expecting some migrant crossings today, but not the number numbers that we were seeing on Sunday and Monday. Now, these crossings this weekend followed an 11-day break, which many people hoped was a sign that the Rwanda plan was acting well as a deterrent and stopping people from making this dangerous journey. But due to the high numbers this weekend, it does look as though it was more likely to do with the bad weather that preceded this weekend. Now, the figures from this bank holiday means that the total number of people that crossed the channel so far this year is around 7,000. And last year, 28,000 people made that treacherous journey from France to the UK. So based on those numbers, the forecast is now that those numbers are going to double, and they are going to reach nearly 60,000 people, 60,000 migrant crossings by the end of 2022. And let's not forget how dangerous that journey is. 37 people lost their lives in the channel last year, and there are, of course, fears that if more people decide to make that journey, there will inevitably be a higher loss of life. So it does appear as though the Rwanda plan is not acting as a deterrent as some people hoped it would be, not yet it seems at least. The French are claiming that it's actually having the opposite effect, and it's encouraging human trafficking gangs to get migrants into boats and get them here before the Rwanda plan is enacted. They are encouraging migrants to make the journey now before the threat of Rwanda is put upon them. Tony Smith is a former Director General of Border Force, and he says that at the moment, to human trafficking gangs, it's like a game of bluff because no one has been sent to Rwanda. And we do know that there are going to be legal challenges now to this Rwanda plan, which inevitably means that it's going to be delayed. And as it is delayed, we are approaching the summer months. It's going to be getting warmer. The conditions out on the channel are going to be getting better. And the months of July and August are the most popular months for migrant crossings. So there are now grave concerns that with the Rwanda plan being delayed and with these human trafficking gangs encouraging migrants to make the journey now, we could see really high numbers this summer and more people risking their lives making this treacherous journey across the channel.
There you go. There was Ellie Costello reporting from Dover. Let's return finally to the local elections, 2 days away, and they are not looking great for the Conservative Party, perhaps unsurprisingly. A survey yesterday suggested they could lose some 550 seats. Now, that would be the worst local election performance in a generation, setting them on track for the heaviest losses in local elections since Tony Blair. Heard of him? Well, since he led Labour in 1996. Joining me in the studio is Conservative peer and polling analyst Lord Robert Hayward. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. What did you make of that survey yesterday? Is that a bit of expectation management, or is there some truth to it?
You've got a real range. The Conservatives are saying big losses, Labour are saying no losses, and
the truth might be in the middle somewhere.
Somewhere in the middle. I've done a projection. I genuinely believe, this is not expectation management, that net Conservatives will probably lose between 250 and 350 seats, which will be bad news, but in comparison with what used to happen after a government been in for 12 years, it's actually relatively small beer. So there will be plenty of opportunity for all the parties to say we've achieved better, etc.
In saying that, this is from a kind of low base from the Conservative Party, in a sense that Labour did very well, didn't they, 4 years ago? So
they did well in the last decade.
Okay.
Their performance in 2018 was good relative to what they'd done over the previous few years. But actually, it was a pretty poor performance for a party in opposition. Historically, parties in opposition
should be sweeping all up,
absolutely thumping the government.
So is it possible the narrative on Friday, rather than being kind of pressure on the Prime Minister, is actually, Keir, you have to do a hell of a lot better if you want to get into number 10?
Rather curiously, we could finish up with both. Pressure on the Prime Minister, unease by Conservative MPs seeing losses in the home counties, the Oxfordshires, the Surreys, the Hampshires of this world, the Tory bastions. But at the same time, pressure on the Labour Party, because actually they haven't gained as many seats as one would normally expect, an opposition.
Isn't it fascinating that actually we talked about the Red Wall a lot, over the last couple of years. We're not talking about the blue wall, which is essentially, I know, I don't know who comes up with these terms, but they should be fired.
Everything is either a gate or a wall.
I know, it's the Americanisation of our politics. Yeah. But the Lib Dems could actually be a force that the Conservative Party now need to be again concerned about, like they were previously.
Small town, county town, home counties, England, is almost certain to show a swing towards the Lib Dems. And their results will come in early, whereas Labour gains may well not come in for several hours. So there's no question that Tory MPs' minds will be very much on the potential gains stroke losses in those home counties.
Is there anywhere that you think we should be looking at in particular?
In Conservative Lib Dem terms, I'd look at Elmbridge, North Hertfordshire, West Oxfordshire. In terms of Conservative Labour terms, I'd look at Wandsworth, Southampton, Newcastle under Lyme. And just for a nice quirky place, Hull, where the Lib Dems may take control from Labour. Outside England, in Scotland, look at Glasgow and North Lanarkshire. Have the Labour Party done well in what have been strong SNP territories? And has the Labour Party overtaken the Tories as second party in Scotland?
And just very finally, London. Whatever one thinks about it, and Boris Johnson, of course, was Mayor of London for a long time, London looks like it's become even more Labour.
Yes, Wandsworth and Westminster, the totemic Tory authorities. Wandsworth is key because the Labour Party have failed to take it for so many occasions. I think they expect to take it this time. If they fail, it'll be a bad line against them. Actually, it may cause Boris Johnson problems as well if they lose it, because the local Tories have been campaigning on low council tax. And if even that doesn't...
Is not a winner.
It's not. It's a problem.
Lord Robert Hayward, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. Just to let you know that lots of you have been getting in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thank you very much for that. On the Sir Keir Starmer and beers and all that sort of stuff. Jenny says, true, there were two different events, two different police forces. However, one national law. The police have had a potential crime sent to investigate. They must investigate it without fear or favour. Many would say they already have and they didn't find any evidence, but they may well be looking at it again. David says, we all know that lefty police will never investigate Labour misdemeanours. Keir Starmer is nothing but a hypocrite. And on the local elections, which we're just talking about there with Robert Hayward, Barbara says, further to my comments on this subject, I would never vote for a Lib Dem MP, as they rarely display enough savviness. However, a local Lib Dem councillor may be the best of a bad bunch. GB Views, gbnews.uk. OK, that is it from me on the briefing today. I'm going to be in Sunderland tomorrow with coverage looking ahead to those local elections as millions of you go to the polls on Thursday. Thomas here in London at 9:30. Gloria at 12. Up next, though, it is Colin Brazier, 4 to 6. Stay tuned for that. But before all of that, here's the weather from the Met Office. See you tomorrow.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fairly cloudy day out there once again. Showers are now starting to develop in places. These are heaviest towards the southwest as well as parts of Wales, especially over higher parts of Wales and the southwest. But they'll die away through the evening after, well, another band of rain pushes into Northern Ireland, Scotland, Northern England, Northern and Central Wales, and then eventually the Midlands and the southeast overnight. With the cloud and that rain, on and off as it will be, temperatures won't fall very far, 10 or 11 Celsius as we start off Wednesday. But it's a cloudy and damp start to the day as a couple of weak weather fronts cross the country. High pressure not far away, that's why the fronts are generally weak. So it's on and off rain, most of it light, some moderate bursts. And as it pushes southeast, skies do tend to brighten very slowly, I think. It will stay mostly cloudy, but the cloud will lift, it will break up. And as that happens, it will warm up and further showers will form, initially towards the west, and then later on, the focus for showers, the Midlands, eastern Scotland, eastern England. Temperatures widely mid to high teens, so it's a warmer day for many, but those showers will be lively where they occur, hail and thunder mixed in. They'll also be quite slow moving. But they do die away into Wednesday night, clear spells for many then. I don't think it'll be a cold night because we've got warmer air arriving from the southwest. So again, despite the clear spells, temperatures holding up into the high single figures, low double figures. Cloudier skies, though, to start off Thursday for Scotland and for Northern Ireland. Outbreaks of rain persistent over the West Highlands for a time, as well as the Northern Isles. Eventually, the rain turns more showery in Scotland and Northern Ireland, and much of England and Wales are dry and bright on Thursday. It's also increasingly warm through the next few days, temperatures peaking in the low 20s.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take